Okay, cool. Today we'll be examining Daniel's prayer in Daniel 9, 4 through 19. But before we get there, I want us to take a moment to look at Revelation 7 and 9. And yes, I am doing two passages from apocalyptic books and has nothing to do with the end times. So, May 21st, 2011, who knows? But Revelation 7:9 says, "After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language. Standing before the throne in front of the Lamb, they were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands." John, a first-century Jewish man, was given the ability to see heaven. Among the persons in heaven worshiping Christ, John, a first-century Jewish man, was able to recognize nations, tribes, people, and language. The characteristics that make us different here are preserved in heaven. Our diversity and differences are not necessarily evil because they remain when we get to heaven, and they remain in a way that John was still able to notice them. Often we use our differences to divide and segregate and create prejudice with them. So therefore, we often see our differences as a result of sin. We see our differences as evil. Now, we're going to go to church tonight, and I want you to look at the person next to you and say, "Neighbor." There will even be somebody looking like you in heaven. I've got issues. Now turn to your other neighbor. Okay, that's bad. Yeah. And say, "Well, maybe not you."
Maybe not you.
Nah. But if we are still different and diverse in heaven, then the differences themselves are not necessarily evil, just our reactions to them. We often use differences, whatever they may be, to create an us versus them mentality. We try to define us and versus them in terms that are most beneficial to us. We label them as different from us. Whatever is different from us is necessarily wrong, and when I say us, I mean me. What is wrong now becomes evil, and eventually what is evil can be punished. This can happen because of many differences in skin color, sex, ability, financial standing, ethnic heritage, lifestyle, religious beliefs, and nationality. I am always right. I am always right. And you are different than me, so that makes you wrong. I point out you're wrong, but you still didn't change, so that makes you wrong on purpose. Because you are willfully wrong, I can label you evil. Because you are evil, I can be justified in my hatred, prejudice, and violence toward you. This is the common course of human thinking. It is the thinking behind black versus white, Croats versus Serbians, Russians versus Georgians, Shiites versus Sunnis, Gentiles versus Jews, Christians versus Muslims, Americans versus communists, and Eagles fans versus Giants fans. The right side of the church versus the left side of the church. Those who are right on this issue, those who are wrong on this issue. All these us versus them are tainted with I'm right and you're wrong. Now we know that these us versus them, especially the Eagles versus Giants, are not real distinctions. They are not real differences between people, except maybe one. The us versus them that I want to have in mind as we travel through the rest of today is the us versus inside these walls compared to the them versus outside. Christians versus lost. Sinners versus saints. Church versus the world. Is that a real difference or not? Now, the current popular remedy for the problem of us versus them is to deny the existence of any differences whatsoever. All people are exactly the same. All cultures are equally good and valuable. All thoughts are equally valid. All religions are equally true. All moral choices are equally justifiable. Can't we all just get along? Right and wrong are no longer absolute choices, but a matter of personal preference, like eating ice cream. What is your favorite flavor of ice cream? Tolerance is today's moral buzzword. We must be accepting of those different than us. The only thing that is unacceptable is to not be accepting. God is handled in the same way. What is your favorite flavor of God? Or what is your favorite flavor of God today? Tapioca. Because you... Tapioca? I don't like the texture thing going on. Yeah, thank you. Yet this brings up logical absurdities. If there are no moral rights and wrongs, how do we label things that we know are truly evil? How do we say the prison camps in Auschwitz were evil, or the Bataan Death March were evil? How do we say something is truly good? If there is no absolute good or bad, how can the sacrificial love of a mother be truly labeled as good? Even the very statement, there are no moral absolutes, is an absolute statement. In classical logic, that is called a self-defeating argument. A self-defeating argument is one that is true and is also false. If there are no moral absolutes, then even the statement there are no moral absolutes is not a statement of truth. Tolerance and relativism is not what we need. Mirza Lopal, a professor at the Yale Divinity School, changes the discussion. The destruction of differences is not the goal. There will always be categories of us and them. There will always be those people like us and those not like us. There will always be people who agree with us and those who don't. We will always separate, categorize, and differentiate between people. There are some differences that cannot be overlooked. What is necessary is that we must become the type of person who is willing to embrace and love who we would label as the evil other. Us must love them. We must. Now, Volf, you might think this is some intellectual guy at Yale thinking of things to tell the rest of the world to do and not do himself. But Volf's hometown is Sarajevo. He was actually interrogated / tortured as a Christian while serving in the communist Yugoslavian army. And then he also watched his country be blown apart by Serbian setniks, terrorists. To him, the evil other is the Yugoslavian army captain who brutally tried to force him to confess the crimes against the state. To him, the evil other is the Serbian setnik terrorist that mortared his hometown. Mirza Volf is trying to love those people, and he thinks that's the Christian way to do things. He cannot deny that some actions are atrocious, but how does he live in the presence of true evil? How does he live with the evildoer, the evil other? Now that might be some intense examples. Let's hear something from Watchman Nee, an early Chinese Christian from the beginning of the last century. And this is what he says. Nothing has done greater damage to our Christian identity and Christian testimony than our trying to be right and demanding right of others. We become preoccupied with what is right and what is not right. We ask ourselves, have we been justly or unjustly treated? And we think thus to vindicate our actions. But that is not our standard. The whole question for us is one of cross-bearing. You ask me, is it right for someone to strike my cheek? I reply, of course not. But the question is, do you only want to be right?